Welcome to our live stream. I'm joined today by art prof teaching artist Jordan McCracken Foster, and we have a special guest, Hartford Art School student Sal Devito, and we're going to be critiquing Sal's portfolio today. If you would like to grow as an artist and you can't afford an art class, we've got everything you need here at Art Prof: critiques, tutorials, and professional development. So we're going to get started by looking at your entire portfolio overall, Sal, but can you give us a little bit of background about your education? Because I know you didn't start at art school, you actually transferred school. So can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I went to, after high school, I went to a community college that had a really good art program. And from there, the teachers and advisors I had there really established my love for art. So when I was there, I was like, this is what I want to do. I want to make art. And then we took a field trip to the Hartford Art School, and it just clicked with me. Like, I was just like, I can see myself going here. So I applied after I ended my 2 years at community college, and I got in, and it's been a pretty fun experience ever since.
Cool. And so we're looking at all your work, and you have a lot of different pieces. You've got drawings, you've got comics and paintings. Long term, do you have any goal for yourself as an artist?
Yeah, I really want to do comics in my life because that's just the medium I love the most, and I love to tell stories. So comics is definitely the way I want to go.
Cool. So Jordan, what is your first take on Sal's entire portfolio overall?
I think the first thing for me is the variety in style and choosing which type of medium to work with. As we talked before the stream, I like how you're like, this is oils, this is acrylic, this is ink wash, this is the, and that's something that's really, really amazing to have in a portfolio, especially as you're just getting out of school. So having a variety is great. And I also noticed you like the subject matter of humanity and using human figure, and there's again so many stories that you can use with that topic, as you can see. And I think you have an infinite amount of possibilities that you can use with the way you think and the way you work. So that's awesome.
I think that's so valuable, Sal, because oftentimes there's a lot of pressure on younger artists now to, quote, find their style. And a lot of people, they're trying to do that too soon. And so I'm excited looking at your portfolio that you have more traditional oil paintings like the self-portrait, but you also have pieces that seem to involve politics and culture and human relationships. And so who knows what direction you're going to go in. But I think by trying so many different things, that's very, very exciting. Okay, let's go through and we'll critique each piece individually. And Sal, of course, will continue to pick your brain. Jordan, what do you think about this piece?
I think this piece is really interesting, again, for the style that it's using. And the couple of things that throw me out are more more subtle. Like there's a big tangent to me on the top right with the headdress and the side of the oh my goodness, the border. And then there's a couple places where I feel like the depth could be pushed a little bit further to create more of a form shadow. But I do think that the look of it is really solid. I think the portrait is capturing the emotion very clearly, and that the technique is used very, very well.
Sal, is this a portrait of a particular person?
No, this was just a classmate of mine. Because the first week of my classes here at Hartford, the teacher was like, we're just going to do some portraits, so just do whoever. So the girl who sat next to me had this great face. I was like, I'm drawing you.
We have some questions from the audience. W315 is saying, is that stippling? And Neil Espinoza is also asking, is that pointillism? Is this all just little dots with a pen?
Yeah, it was my first time with a rapidograph.
This is a rapidograph? Oh my God, this must have taken forever to create. You have a lot of patience.
Thank you.
Well, what I really like about this piece, Sal, is the drape. I mean, is it a towel? Is that what she's wearing?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that area, the whole upper left-hand corner is really, really rich, very volumetric. I mean, I can really feel the bulge of the towel. That area is just outstanding. I think where the piece needs more work, though, is in the face and also in the fingers. I feel like the face has a flatness to it, which is not as apparent in the towel area. I don't know, Jordan, what do you think about the anatomy there?
Yeah, there's a couple portions that feel a little bit flat, and that's sort of what I meant when I was saying that there could be a little bit more done with the form shadows. And like with the towel, the headdress, you could feel the curve of it. Every single little bit, every single plane seems to have a purpose of showing how the light works. With the face, which is really incredibly dimensional, there's a bit of flatness in the cheek area, the side of the face, the plane of the nose. And so those areas I think you should watch out for, because you're close. You're definitely getting there, but I think it can be pushed just a little bit further and it'll have as much depth as the headdress.
Cool.
All right, let's look at this next piece. So what is the story behind this? Was this a class assignment or is this an independent piece?
This was a class assignment. We had to do something with reflective surfaces, but the main crux was no mirrors. So I had this Zippo lighter that was shiny. So I just drew a portrait with it.
Jordan, what's your first take?
This is a really interesting concept. Yeah, I find it really fascinating, actually, the fact that you have the portrait in here, and then you have the lighter with the sunflower coming out of it. I'm actually curious, Sal. Can you tell me what the sunflower is about a little bit more?
I just wanted something to come out of the Zippo, and I was like, what would be a pretty interesting image? And a flower just seemed to fit. So, yeah, I drew a flower.
Okay. Well, I mean, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, you go.
Oh, I was just gonna say, the thing with the flower, it is interesting, but I don't know if it's just me, but is there something that you're trying to say with the flower other than making it interesting? You don't have to answer this right now, if you know, but that's always something that I look for, is when there's something that's unusual. Like when I see a lighter, I expect fire to come out, but now you have this flower, and is there a reason why? Is there a story behind this? And it could be abstract or not, but I always would like to know that sort of thing. So you don't have to answer right now. You can come up with an answer later if you want, but that is something I'm curious about.
Okay.
I mean, I feel like when I look at the piece, I didn't know it was a lighter. I was actually really confused about what I was looking at. I felt like the person was maybe holding one of those pocket mirrors. And then the rest of it, I really was like, okay, there's some shapes here. I had trouble putting together the upper section of the lighter. And a lighter is really hard because those are really, really polished, super reflective. It's not like a glass, which is easier to show the reflection. So you picked a really tough subject. I guess my take on the sunflower is that it's meant to be a joke because you expect fire to come out, and yet this cute little flower comes out. And so it's a little bit of a surprise. But I don't think that comes across. It just feels random to me. And so I can't really figure out the reason why it's there. So you might think about maybe being a little bit more deliberate about what are you trying to say. Like if you want it to be a joke, then maybe the picture needs to have a more humorous feel to it. And then maybe that will come across. Like the flower is a little bit more perky. Maybe it's a little rounder. Maybe it's like leaping out. I mean, you can think about a million other ways to do that. So think about that. And then the other thing is that I think you need to work on texture, because if you think about a hand and a thumb, it's smooth, but it's not nearly as smooth as a lighter. So you want to work on getting a broader range of textures. And I think that would help us really distinguish things in a different way. We have a question from Owen. Are you reviewing portfolios today? We're just going to look at Sal's. However, if you guys want to submit your portfolio to get a free critique here live on YouTube, we do have a link in the video description below that you guys can take a look at. Okay, so I was going to say, Sal, that I think you need to work on your anatomy, because if we go back and we look at this, yes, it's a small head and it's in the reflection, but I get the feeling with a lot of the heads, like if we go back here, that you're not thinking enough about the skeletal structure. Jordan, do you want to make some commentary about that in general, the anatomy in relation to faces?
Yeah, I think that understanding the anatomy when it comes to muscles, bone structure, all the above expressions, those are incredibly important. And especially for you, for a few reasons. One, because most of your portfolio has the human figure, and two, you said you want to go into comics, which will showcase a lot of humans, I imagine. So understanding those different things, how to capture subtlety, how to capture wild expressions, all those things need to be something that you're prepared to create at any given moment when you're creating a piece. And it'll only enhance your artwork, because when someone's looking at your work, you're not always going to be there to explain it. And so you need to be able to capture those things just with your drawing or your painting. And that is not an easy thing to do all the time. I struggle with it a lot. And so just keeping those things in the back of your mind and understanding what it is that you're trying to say at any given point.
Right, okay.
Sal, have you had any instruction on anatomy at your art school?
We've had a few figure drawing classes, as most art schools do. There are some times where the teacher takes like a few sections out of class to talk about specific anatomy, specifically head or the hands. So I have a vague understanding, but I just need to teach myself to get better at it.
It takes time. Anatomy is not something that you learn overnight, but I think I would definitely put that on your list, specifically because, as Jordan said, you do have a lot of portraits in your portfolio. Jordan, what do you think about this piece?
This I think is really something that I think that there's a lot going on here, and I love the sgraffito, but I'm like it kind of goes in the way of not fully understanding what this is about. And I think that there's a couple areas, like in the vacancy in the area of the head, where I would love to see the inside, like the curvature of the skull, and the bats. I would love to see even more focus, like a focal area for them, like which is the main bat. And it's more of a composition thing when I look at it overall. But the concept is cool. I just wish that there was a couple points I could really pinpoint as like, I want to look here first.
We have a comment from Blue Will Spirit, who says, you can see that Sal does a lot of pieces that take time and patience. And 10,000 Crows is a big fan of this piece as well. The one with the bats is my favorite. Well, is there a specific story here, Sal?
We were just doing Scratchboard, and I wanted something to like kind of come out of the head. And I was struggling with ideas, but then I was just like reading Batman comics. So I thought, oh, bats flying out would be awesome. So I just thought like the head is the cave and the bats are flying out. So that was like my thought process of making this.
And is this a self-portrait?
Yes.
Yeah, I was thinking it doesn't exactly look like Christian Bale. Christian Bale doesn't have a mustache in the movie. So, well, I guess what I'm wondering about this piece, because I do really like it as an image. I think it's very seductive. Like you really get drawn into the scene, mostly because of the bats in that huge vacant hole. But I guess the first thing I would think about is trying to get the parts to relate more, because I feel like the piece is sort of divided in half. Like the left-hand side is the face, the right-hand side is the bats. And I would imagine if you really have bats, they're not going to hang out in a clump like that. Some of them will go behind your head. Some of them will be in the lower left-hand corner. So I guess I just want the bats to spread out more in the composition. And then the other thing is, did you have a photographic reference for the bats, or are these just made up out of your head?
Just made up out of my head. Like I looked up images and got the general shape, but it's all out of my imagination.
So, Jordan, what do you think about that? Because sometimes drawing from imagination is great, and other times you really need a reference. So, what do you think is the case here?
So when you're drawing from imagination, I think that there's definitely a time and place for it, but you need to supplement that with a really strong composition idea and get everything settled in your mind first before you get to the actual piece. And I think one of the things that kind of took me out when I asked you about like what the story behind this all was, I think based on what you described to me, there's probably a lot of even more interesting compositions you could have chosen to showcase this. Just as Claire mentioned, the 50-50 type of thing with the bats and then the head. And I want you to explore that as you go. And that's where photo reference can come in, because let's say you're watching a movie, you find something interesting, you could take that composition, put your own spin on it, and then produce this piece. And I think it would instantly boost it to a whole nother level. And yeah.
Well, this is an interesting comment from Sydney, who says, you look so chill with bats. Yeah, if I had bats flying out of, well, then again, if I had a big hole in my head, maybe that's not the first issue I have. But I wonder, did you think about the facial expression in relation to the bats?
No, I wanted the face to be very stoic. I kind of wanted it to be a more serious piece. So, like, choosing not to have a reaction was an artistic choice I made, just because I wanted it to be very stern and just understanding of the composition.
And this is a cool idea from Seven Angelic, who says, if some of the bats clung to his face with their little claws or hung upside down. See, that's great, because if you look at the bats, they're all front view, which doesn't really fly in a more realistic place, because some of them would be upside down, some of them would be on the side. And so that's where the photographic reference, not only will it make it more believable, but it will make your composition more diverse. Because right now they feel like they're almost like stamped on the page, and I want a little bit more movement. So, by the way, we do have the Scratchboard drawing tutorial if any of you guys are interested, because it's such a cool technique. It's so satisfying. And so check this out. Jordan, how about this piece?
I think this one's pretty fun. This actually feels more like a movie poster to me. So we're getting a very different side of you, because before we've seen things that are very close up, maybe basically from shoulders up. But here we're seeing something that looks like it could be a montage in a film or something like that. And I think that the one thing that I would really love to emphasize this is some really strong lighting. I feel like that tells the whole mood of a piece right there. And I think you have the poses, you have the story, and now we just need something to really push it to, again, the next level of getting the mood of the way or the emotion that the characters are feeling.
Is this the producers, the story, Sal?
Yes, it is.
I actually don't know the story. I just know Matthew Broderick and what's his face? I can't remember his Nathan something. Sorry, I can't remember.
Nathan Lane and Matthew Broderick.
Nathan Lane, that's it. Couldn't remember his name. I love the two characters in the middle. They have so much perk, I guess. And I like how the figure on the right is like looking at the other figure. That's a really fun interaction. And then the fact that the figures on the bottom are so little compared to them. I like that you're playing with the scale. So I was going to say, actually, the part that I think needs the most work is the background, because are they supposed to be in New York?
Yeah, it takes place in like the 1960s New York. So try to put this like skyline in. But because I put so much focus into the two figures, it got lost, and I didn't put that much work into it.
Well, so there's two things I would change about the buildings. The first thing is I actually think they're too dark. I wish that they were lighter, so that way they didn't get in the way of me appreciating the figures. And the second thing is you got to do your research. Because, Jordan, when you think about New York, what are some iconic New York skyscrapers?
Empire State Building. There's Radio City Music Hall. There's all these different iconic places, and Claire's absolutely right. If you're trying to illustrate New York, in so many stories, New York is a character in and of itself, and you want to have buildings that stand out from the pack, because it's not just any city. It's not, unnamed city in Iowa somewhere. This is New York. And so you definitely want to have your environment have as much personality as the characters that you're putting in, which clearly you've put a lot of work into getting the characters feeling a certain type of way, showcasing a certain emotion, and you want the world to match that.
Okay, let's take a look at this one. Looks like we are going back a couple centuries into the Renaissance, I'm going to guess. I could be totally wrong. And what I love about this is that you are dealing with so many different time periods, different types of costumes. I mean, that hat really leaps out to me right away. What was the story behind this piece?
We had to do historical pictures, mostly involving drapery. So the teacher gave us, she's like, I want something before like 18, whatever. And I was taking a Renaissance class, and I was learning about Cosimo de' Medici. So I was like, this guy seems pretty cool. I want to do him. So I made a costume, got the reference, and drew that.
What's your take, Jordan?
Yeah, before Sal even said anything, I could tell this one was particularly well researched. This one has a depth to it that the others don't have. And it's one of those things that you don't have to say, you can just kind of feel it. And so I really am glad that you said that this one was super well researched. And I think this one actually has one of the most dynamic compositions. This one in the image with the lighter. I always love when you have things in the background kind of either silhouetting or shaping out a character and pointing you to the direction where you want to look. So that drape that's kind of pointing all the way down to the neck. And I love stuff like that. And I think you could use that even more in your pieces. And the other thing I also noticed is, besides the last one we looked at, this is one of the pieces that isn't just cropped kind of close up. You tend to do that a lot where it's just shoulders up. And so now we're getting a nice view of who the whole character is.
I also think another strength of this piece, Sal, is the way things are layered. Like, do you guys see how there's a brick wall in the background? And then the way that you just pulled that drape right over that brick, and then you have the figure in front of the drape. Overlap is so easy and effective, and yet so many people don't do that. A lot of people just sort of line things up, and I think that layering is giving this drawing a lot of depth, which I'm very excited to see. I guess what I would work on is asking yourself, what do I want to really emphasize, and what can push back a little bit? Because while I love the background, again, like the other one, it's a little bit too pronounced. And really, it's more about the figure. The figure is the main event. Sure, we love the background. So one thing I would think about, we actually do have a video on this atmospheric perspective, where basically things get lighter and lighter as they go further back in the distance. Things that are closer, like the figure, are going to be higher in contrast and have more detail. So it's not that the individual parts aren't well drawn, because they definitely are. It's just, how do you relate them to each other? Like, which one is more important? That's what you're asking, really, almost like you're the movie director. Like, you're saying, pay attention to this figure. This is important, but less so. And we do have a comment from Seven Angelic, who says, I feel like the texture of the stained glass should be a little different. So did you research stained glass, or is that more like a pattern that you put in?
A little bit of both. Like, I go to church a lot, so I see stained glass pretty much every Sunday. So I had an idea of how to do it, but I just wanted to do something a little bit different. So I made up texture.
Yeah, stained glass is really hard to draw. It's weird. It's reflective, it's colored, it's dark and dramatic. So I would just make sure you do a little more research there. Jordan, what about this oil painting?
I think this one's really solid. I love that we're finally getting to see some color out of you, Sal. This is great. I think that this one actually succeeds where the first piece that we saw, the portrait with the towel, it kind of falls a little bit, because now we're getting some form shadow, especially in the side of the face here. We're getting some cast shadows. And I think that the depth is much more successful in this piece. And by seeing those planes and understanding, that, I get a better sense of the underlying structure of the face.
Thank you.
The lighting is really good, Sal. Very clear. You can see how volumetric the face looks. Especially, I think here on the side, like I can feel that cheekbone. That is an area where we're really seeing good anatomical structure. But then you're also getting things like that cast shadow that's coming down. That's beautifully done. I guess the area where I want you to maybe pay a little bit more attention is actually the hair, because a lot of people skimp on the hair because a lot of people are like really into the facial features and they work really hard, and you obviously did, but I feel like you didn't put as much time into the hair. Is that true, or what do you think?
I just gel my hair very thickly, so there wasn't a lot to work with I thought. So I just like put in the few streaks in the front of where the light was bouncing off the gel.
I am going to guess, Sal, this is one of your friends. Savannah says he is always Freddie Mercury for Halloween.
I was getting Freddie Mercury vibes.
Yeah, actually, Alyssa said the same thing. Looks like Freddie Mercury. And 10,000 Crows says, I like how the red hoodie pops out against the more muted skin tones and the background. Well, what do you think about the colors, Jordan?
I actually think that I feel like the hoodie works, but it's also really saturated, and it actually kind of draws my eye there first. And part of me feels like the background color should be something a little different. Maybe it's the lighting. It might be because the tone is very, very similar to the skin, and it kind of makes it merge together. So I think either having a darker background or a different color, like maybe something that's make the red hoodie stand out. It could be like a bluish color or a purple or something like that. But something to make the face stand out a little bit more, I think, would be better.
I actually think maybe the thing about the color is that you need to balance warm and cool colors, because in the painting, it's pretty much all warm colors, like peaches and oranges and reds. So maybe like what Jordan was saying about the background, if the background was a cool color, like maybe a grayish blue or maybe a grayish green, something like that to play off of the red, because I agree the red is so pronounced that I pay a lot of attention to it in a way that I think is maybe a little distracting to the face. So I would take a look at that. The other thing I would, oh, go ahead. Yeah.
Something I realized actually a couple of weeks ago was the hoodie I'm wearing is my University of Hartford hoodie, so it's my school hoodie. And the green shirt that you only see a little bit of is my community college shirt. So I didn't realize that, but it's actually like my two schools coming together.
Oh, well, then maybe you can make the green shirt. I mean, if you were to do this piece again, have the green shirt be more prominent, because actually I like that contrast between the green and the red. That would be a nice relationship for you to pull out. By the way, for those of you guys who are doing portraits, I would take a look at this stream, and Sal, this would be good for you too, is just to think about background ideas for portraits. Because while I think the background here could be a different color or something, it is fairly blank. And I think that that does happen for a lot of people when they do portraits. They sort of think, oh, I don't really need a background. But there's a lot of things you can do. So I would definitely take a look at this stream. Jordan, how about this piece?
I think that this one has probably got the most sophisticated background that I've seen from you. And so I like the trend that it's heading in. I think that this one, and the reason I like it is because it's building an actual world. Before we saw some buildings that didn't have much of a full story to them. But here we have flags. We're clearly in a very specific location in a bakery of some sort. You have the different pastries, you have the table. And so I love seeing that, because when you have characters, yes, they're fun. And I'm a character designer. I love that, but you also have to place them in a world. And so I think that for what you have here, it's really, really solid. I also love the little detail of the text on the shirt and just giving this character a particular personality that we could sort of connect with.
Thank you.
Yeah, in case some of you guys can't read the text, it says Italian to the core. Is that a shirt you've seen, or do you own that shirt, or did you make it up?
I own that shirt.
Where did you get it?
My mom got it for me at some Italian festival a couple years ago.
Yeah, I love the scene, Sal. I think it has so much personality and it's so specific, right? Because I think what we were looking at earlier with this portrait, this really is more about how you look. Whereas when I look at this one, it's about how the person looks, but it's about all the details. Like, is that an espresso machine in the background?
Yep.
It's a very particular one, and all the pastries in there, even the choice to have the red checkerboard tablecloth, the little pink package. I mean, I feel like every object in this image has a little story, and that's so wonderful because it's an image that's just packed with information. So who is this person in the portrait?
So this was a character I'm working on. He's supposed to be like an older version of me, but so he's like some Italian mafioso. So I really just like wanted to work with him and create the world around him. That was my train of thought, was if I can get where the world he's coming from, I can illustrate him better.
Savannah is saying Sal is the most Italian that could ever Italian. I love that. And Olivia is saying, is this a portrait of future you, which you said you were? And W315 says, oh my God, this is adorable. Sydney saying he's the embodiment of Italian. And 10,000 Crows says, I love how this painting really tells us something about Sal as a person. Exactly. There's so much personality. I would love to see you do a whole series of paintings about this because it's such an exciting narrative. I would say in terms of the way it's painted, I think with the proportions of the figure, you either have to make it really wonky and strange so we can tell that you meant to do it that way, or you have to make the proportions like a real person. Because right now, it's a little bit unsure. Like, it almost seems like you're trying to get correct proportions, but you didn't quite succeed. So if you're gonna make funky proportions, just make sure it looks very deliberate in terms of the piece. All right, let's take a look at this one. Jordan, what do you think?
I think that this one is looking pretty good. I think that the proportions and the way it's painted is all solid, but again, this kind of I'm gonna bring up lighting one more time because I think that's where this piece is starting to suffer a bit. There's a lot of things you can do with lighting. You could, just lighting itself can tell you how you feel about someone. Maybe you revere the Pope. Some people like him, some people don't, and you can, in choosing the lighting, you could really display how you want us to feel about him, what you're trying to say about it, and also the texture and the clothing. I think could be something that you could really spend a lot of time on because he's got some really nice outfits too. So so just keep that in mind as you're displaying some of your work.
So Sal, I have to ask, why the Pope? Why did you choose the Pope as your subject?
I don't. Well, I'm a Catholic, so I do hold the Pope in high regards. And I just figured I had some oil paints I wanted to do, and I'm like, I want this to be a really nice looking portrait. And I have a little prayer card of the Pope. And I wanted to play with like the textures of the white and compare that with. So it was an experiment of trying to get like one color but different variations.
Yeah, the reason why I ask you why the Pope is that a portrait of the Pope, you don't look at it the same way we look at your self-portrait because it's a heavily loaded subject, religion, and culture, and obviously major person to be regarded on the planet. And I just wonder if you could put a little more personality into this to make it feel less like a copy of a photo, because I can't tell from this that the Pope has any relationship with you. Like, actually, what I thought was really interesting is when I was in Rome studying in college, I lived like 20-minute walk from the Vatican. So I go there all the time. And I'll tell you guys, those of you who have been to the Vatican, tell me if you've been there before. The gift shops just cracked me up. Like, did you know you can buy Pope stickers and like Pope necklaces? I was like, really? Like, we're gonna put the Pope on a sticker? And so there were just so many variations of how people interact with the Pope. So I just want a little bit more personality here for that reason.
I just want to read some comments from Neil Espinoza. The red background is creepy, in my opinion. It makes me feel like he's in hell. And then there's another one from 10,000 Crows that says these colors make this feel a bit ominous. And I think the reason for that is because naturally we associate the color red with darkness. And I think one of the things you should work on, Sal, is being able to tell a story without using your actual words, because you have a lot of tools as an artist. You have line, shape, color, and value. And all of those things need to be utilized to push your work forward. And so certain colors will give us certain emotions, certain lighting choices, certain shapes that make us feel a certain way. And you almost have to be a psychologist in that sense. You know, I know it's a lot, but those are some of the things that I think moving forward you should really consider pushing forward, so that you could just put it out there and people will automatically figure out what you're trying to say.
I just want to point out this comment from Amoxification, who says, maybe add some green complements in the background. Leaves are green and the vine is a symbol for a blessed community. Yeah, there's a lot of ways you can do it. But I think what we're saying is, tell us something about what you think of the Pope, because like we said before, the Pope is a very polarizing figure. People have very different ideas about who the Pope is. So maybe show us a little bit more of that. Now I'm bringing up this stream because I noticed that in the Pope image, you're getting a lot of glare in the upper right-hand corner. So you just want to make sure that your photographs accurately represent your paintings, because otherwise people aren't looking at it correctly. What do you think about this piece, Jordan?
This is probably the best lighting I've seen from you. I love the yellow rim light. I'm not exactly sure what it means, but it just adds so much more depth to it. And it is so much more interesting to me just based on that alone, even than the previous painting that we looked at. And so when you think about things like rim line, when you think about the form shadow that you're putting, I love how you're getting the blues and purples and pinks in there. It's looking much more solid. And then the concept itself is really, it's really funny to me. I find it really enjoyable. So yeah, this is really strong for you.
Sal, I don't know if this is something you're conscious of, but I think you have a great sense of humor. And this one is definitely part of that. I feel like the portrait of you as an older man. I mean, have you thought about trying to push that humor in your work?
I try, and depending on what story or what I'm drawing, sometimes it comes out easier. Other times I have to like pull myself back. So like this one, it was very fun to do. So yeah, my sense of humor was right on center.
Because I think that you might consider really pushing that and make it more clear and deliberate, because when you're funny, you're really funny. Like, this is such a weird image. And the thing is, though, I'll tell you, when I saw it, I didn't know it was a cookie on the head. It took a minute. And I think part of it is that the cookie is just so small, the one at the bottom. And there's a lot of background that is not really giving me a lot of information. So maybe what I would do with the composition is just move it up. So that way we see maybe the whole hand, the whole cookie, and then cut back on the background. Because the thing about your compositions is some of them are very good, like the one of the Renaissance guy. But some of them, I think you tend to crop out things that sometimes give you more information. Like the fact that it's just one finger, I think is a little bit awkward. So maybe just think about how to rearrange what's going on. Yeah, look at this. 10,000 Crows said, that's true. Sal's humor does come through in their work. And W315 says, so intense with a cookie. See, that's what makes it so funny, is that you're holding a cookie, but you're like really, really focused. And so I would just really pump that up as much as you can. All right, let's look at this comic. Jordan, what do you think?
So I would have to really like understand the story before I say a whole lot. So can I actually hear, Sal, what this comic is about really briefly before I say anything?
Yeah, the digital illustration teacher partnered with the therapy people here at school, and they gave us scripts. So it was our job to make a comic with the script we have. So this thing was about a guy who doesn't really understand therapy. Like, he comes in and his first line is, so where's the couch? And it's someone slowly accepting therapy as they go on.
Okay. So thank you for explaining that. So I'm going to critique this as if I'm some sort of comics editor. One thing that I think is incredibly important to have when you're telling sequential stories like this is to have a variety of angles, one of them being establishing shots. So before you explained that to me, I had no idea where we were. And when you're telling a story, I think that's incredibly important to know. So think about where we are. What sort of key symbols can you use to tell us where we are? Like if we're outdoors, are there trees? Are there a bunch of mountains? If we're indoors, if we're at a therapy session, does she have paintings on the wall or pictures of her family in the office? Is there a bookshelf? Things like that are really good indicators. The other thing is, I think this is the only time I've actually seen you use something other than 1-point perspective in your work. So I think you should continue to push that, because as a storyteller, as a comics artist, that is something that's really going to be helpful, and it'll give you more variety in your work.
Yeah, I think linear perspective really helpful to learn for comics, because you really need to think about point of view in comics. Like, are you doing bird's eye view? Is it a worm's eye view? And actually, one of my favorite panels, Sal, is this one on the left in the middle, which is this like zoomed in version of the guy's face. I think that one really sticks out to me because the other panels, the figures are all about the same size. And so that zoom in is very refreshing. It's like you notice it right away. So you might think about zooming way in, zooming way out, having more variety. Like, wouldn't it be cool to have a scene where the two people are really, really small and maybe you get a better sense of the space? So I think just pushing the contrast and the variety so we don't feel like the panels are repetitive. I feel that the right panel is not as strong as the left panel, because on the right panel, we have the two people like kind of lined up. It's the same thing over and over again. So it gets a little bit monotonous. So maybe the left-hand side is more the direction that you want to go in. So we do have this stream, which is how to start creating a comic. Definitely take a look at this, those of you guys who are into comics, because sometimes it's just knowing how to start. It's really, really hard. Okay, so Sal, I know this is a movie poster. Can you tell people about it?
Yeah, so this was done by the movie Pulp Fiction, and it's the scene where Christopher Walken's character is giving the kid his father's watch.
So Jordan, what do you think?
So I gotta be honest, I've never seen Pulp Fiction before, so I have to look at this and critique it as someone who has no idea what the scene's about. So is this supposed to be a scene that's more heartwarming or more insidious in nature?
It's a more heartwarming scene, I would say, because it's Christopher Walken plays the boy's. He plays the friend of the boy's father, who sadly dies, and so he's giving him his father's watch as like, your father wanted you to have this.
Gotcha. Okay. So in that case, I think the colors are really, really solid. I think that, the warm tones and the pinks definitely help convey that feeling. But the one thing that actually kind of takes me out a little bit is the gesture of the hand, because there's a very different action from I'll just take a small object. If I do this to you, if I'm giving you something versus this, those are two very different emotions, and they're incredibly subtle. And it's not even something that I don't even know most people would articulate, but it's something you feel. If you're handing something to a kid, oftentimes you'll do this as a sign of it. I'm very safe, trust me, that type of thing. Whereas the hand motion that you gave us in the work is more, I'm forcing this upon you. Does that make sense?
Right. Okay.
Did you work directly from a movie still for this, Sal, or did you make up the image yourself?
I got reference from the scene Christopher Walken is in, but I just made the composition myself, so it's like a mix of both.
Well, because I agree with Jordan, I feel that it's a rather aggressive image. Like, here's my watch. It's a little bit dramatic. I don't know that I see it as a very loving gesture, but I wonder if part of it is just cropping the face like that he seems a little bit disoriented, and maybe that's an area where if we saw the whole face, it might feel a little bit more friendly. It's hard because compositionally, I think it's a really cool painting. We're just saying maybe it doesn't fit the tone of what you're trying to say, because I do really like how the hand is so big, the face pushes back. There's a really nice feeling of space within the piece. It's just sometimes the image doesn't really fit what you're going after. So I might consider that as well. Okay, we've got this acrylic painting. Jordan, what do you think?
I like this one. I think that this one explores color really well. I think it has a pretty interesting composition, even though it's the background is fairly symmetrical. And I feel like this woman that you painted has a particular character to her. Like there's a personality. I feel like if I were to interview her, she would have very specific opinions on certain things. And so I noticed that as we've gone through some of your work, I don't know if this was created before, or I don't know if there's a chronological order to the way this is set up, but I feel like you're starting to get closer to giving these individual characters their own personalities and their own life inside of the work.
Sal, can you explain the assignment? Because I know you were looking at a specific artist.
Yeah, this was a project where we had to look up the artist Alphonse Mucha. So he draws like these very intricate designs and these very beautiful women. And I had this idea in my head of this Virgin Mary-esque character. And when I got this assignment, I'm like, I'm doing this project. So I had my friend drape herself in the Italian flag, and I got this really awesome idea and proceeded from there.
So Sydney is saying personification of Italy. Is that what you were thinking, that she is Italy?
Yeah, I guess in a way. I still don't have a specific answer of who she is, but she is very much Italy in and of herself.
So if that's the case, really work that flag. Like I might even make it to the point that you can barely see her dress and that the flag is almost totally covering her. And then I'd love to see more specifics in the background. Like think about, what does Italian architecture look like? Or maybe one of those espresso machines shows up in the background, because that's such an opportunity for you, again, to place those props and to tell a story, because I love this idea of the giant Italian flag draping over her. But the thing is, to me, the background is lacking by comparison, doesn't quite have the personality that we've seen in some of your other pieces. Olivia's asking, love the colors and palettes. Is the figure sitting down or is she floating?
I just had her like standing in front of this mosaic I designed, so I didn't have a specific idea of having her floating or sitting.
It might be good to figure that out, because that does change how we look at the figure and how you distribute the weight. So take a look at that. And what about this one, Jordan?
So this one's interesting. There's a lot of interesting like symbols going on. We have the United States flag, be prepared, the little American eagle. But I do think that this is, again, one of those pieces that there's a lot of story being conveyed, but mostly in the props that are being used and not so much the background. So it's doing sort of the opposite effect in a way of, or not maybe the opposite effect, but it's doing a strange effect of the one with the bakery that I mentioned. I forget the title of that one, but I really wish that there was even more to the background than there is now. It just feels a little like it's lacking something. And I can see you put so much detail in the character, like even down to the little pins, and they look different. They don't even look like the same pin. It's like there's 50 of them. And so I really think that you should continue to push your environments a little bit more, especially with this piece.
Okay.
Sal, is this supposed to be Boy Scouts of America?
Yes.
So were you a Boy Scout? Is that why you chose this?
Yeah, I turned Eagle Scout when I graduated around community college. So that was the subject I wanted to portray here, because in reality, the Eagle Scout badge is like this very tiny thing. So I wanted to like blow it up to show the significance of it.
Cool. And so where is the figure supposed to be? The background?
Kind of like in a stage auditorium kind of thing, where the stage is behind him. You have like these really big curtains kind of framing the character, because that's kind of where we had the award ceremony for Eagle Scouts.
I mean, I wonder if maybe it's that the figure doesn't feel like it's interacting with the background, because the figure is great. I think the figure is so much personality, like Jordan said, but the figure does feel like it's almost collaged onto the background. And so maybe if I saw the figure actually on the stage, maybe the figure had a cast shadow, something that shows that physical interaction, because I actually think this is one of the pieces where I want you to zoom out, because not seeing the legs and seeing the contact point of the feet into the stage, I think it's a little bit confusing. Like Kat Molina is saying, the composition's throwing me off a little bit, maybe because the figure is so close to dead center. And Scott is saying the floorboards don't seem to follow linear perspective or approach a vanishing point. I mean, I don't think that's necessarily a problem, because I don't feel that this piece is about linear perspective. It's not really about that. It's more about the person. But I think either way, I think you want to find a way for them to interact a little bit more clearly. Jordan, how about this one?
I recognize this, but I think this is a lot of fun, actually. Clearly, I'm getting a Norman Rockwell type of vibe here. I love the Superman aspect. And I also, this is something that I don't think I've seen from you yet. You're using direction to point us in the way of the composition. So the way that you typically, at least in America, we would read from left to right. We start with, I guess, the guy at the booth, the bartender guy, or the coffee pourer, whatever you want to call him, waiter, and you see us progressing all the way to the right, and you just see Superman's cape. And it's one of those things that we already know who he is. You don't have to see his face. You might not have even had to have the S logo. Just the colors that are chosen will automatically say, oh, that's Superman. And so I like how you're hinting to those things really, really well.
Actually, my favorite character, Sal, I know this is about Superman. I love the guy behind the counter. He's great. Everything down to the 5 o'clock shadow that he's got, the way he's holding the coffee pot. I feel like he has so much personality. You're very good at characters, and I want you to keep expanding on these people, because the two figures in the front, in the middle, they're a little bit less interesting to me because they're more generic. They're not as specific, but that guy, I feel like that guy behind the counter could make a whole series based on him. So keep up that specificity, because I think you're just doing such a great job developing these characters. So this is, again, that stream about color schemes. Sal, you were talking to us about this earlier, if you guys want to check this out. And Sal is on Instagram. So if you guys want to follow him on Instagram, there he is. And the link is also in the video description below. And somebody had asked earlier, Bubble Blowing Baby says, how do you get them to review your portfolio? Here's how you do it. So basically, you need to get to the submission form. And what you're going to do, you want to go to artprof.org. You want to click on art critiques. You'll come to this page, and you're going to click on the purple button, and that will then take you to the submission form. So you submit your stuff, and we'll let you know if we accept it for critique. We have many other critiques here on our YouTube channel. You guys can check those out. Art Prof has a podcast. It's available on Spotify and also on iTunes. And in a little bit, Jordan and I will be hanging out in the Art Prof Discord in the post live streams channel. So we hope you guys will hang out with us there. Please subscribe to our channel and join the Art Prof family. And I want to say a big thank you to our top Patreon supporters who keep Art Prof up and running. Thank you to everybody who watched the stream. And thank you so much, Sal, for sharing your work with us. We're so excited about where you're going to go. So definitely keep in touch. Everybody, thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.